Well, hi, Dr. Dani. Thank you so
Hi,
much for being on my podcast today.
happy to be here.
So I started working with you over a year ago, and you helped me with my crazy hip issue I was dealing with.
Yep.
And so that's been quite the process. And I didn't even really know much about your specific approach to chiropractic. So I'm really excited to talk about it today. But I think a good place to start would be to have you share about your healing journey. You were diagnosed with a brain tumor and then like you healed yourself, which is truly amazing.
Yeah,
So yeah, share about that.
it's a pretty cool story. Yeah, so when I was 31, I was a new doctor, and I started to have all kinds of symptoms of a brain tumor. I started losing my vision. When all my peripheral vision was just going to the point where I had about that much, just a tiny bit left,
Oh,
and started having ridiculous headaches, and my hormones got all screwed up, and I was in denial because, trained in neurology, and I was like, this cannot be. Like, I'm the healthiest person I know. And finally went in and got an MRI and saw this huge thing. And I was so defeated. And the doctors wanted to do surgery. And I just said, I know this type of tumor. I know it's going to come back in 80% of the cases after surgery. That's just not good odds. So I
yeah.
don't want my head cut open. So, as you've probably figured out, I'm somebody that likes to figure out why things happen and then figure out how to make them not do what they're supposed to, what they're doing at that point,
Yeah, get to the root
and
cause.
get to the root cause. And yeah, that's one of the things I think that's different about me is I look at things on a whole functional support or system. Like, something might be happening in one part of the body, but that's the symptom, and the cause will be coming from someplace else, like you.
Yeah.
So in my case, I decided to go on a whole spiritual journey, change my diet. Well, I stopped eating for 10 days. So
Yeah,
fasted
you
just
did
on
a
water.
fast.
Yep, for 10 days. And then I switched to a vegetarian diet. I meditated, I prayed. I really knew that I could figure it out. I just didn't know exactly how I was going to do it. And then I remembered meeting a craniosacral therapist. And I'm trained in cranial work. There's not a lot of people that are. And we can talk about that later if you want.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
um, she seemed like a really cool lady, and she seemed like she kind of knew what she was doing, and she lived and worked on a houseboat. And I thought that sounded like a pretty neat place to receive healing type of work. So I made an appointment with her and really didn't feel much on the first one. The second one, I was driving. I lived in Minnesota at the time, and driving in the winter in Minnesota is scary anyway.
Yeah.
Driving with that much vision, driving with that much vision is very, very scary.
Oh my, yeah.
And I was driving on a freeway, and a car had passed me, and I didn't even realize there was another car on the road with me. That's how little vision I had left. And that's when it really hit me. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to figure this out today. So the last 20 minutes, I was driving with my hands just white knuckling. And I got there. Um, those last 20 minutes, I did something that's very, very important that I tell a lot of people. I had the intention to figure this out. So intention is a really, really, really powerful word. So those last 20 minutes, my intention was today is the day. I have to figure this out. I can't drive after today. And I got into her place, and I said, don't even talk to me, just let me lay down. And um, I was in such a zone. It was so cool. I was laying there, and I felt like I was being watched, like somebody was looking in the boat, but there wasn't anybody there. The curtains were drawn. But when somebody looks at you across the room and you
Yeah.
look over and they kind of look away, and
Yeah.
it felt like somebody was there with us. And I was like, it's so weird. And then I had my eyes closed, and all of a sudden I had something happen like I've never had happen before. I started having this vision of a cliff, like a rock. I used to be a rock climber, and I could see it on my left side, and I could see the route I would take to climb. And I was telling this craniosacral person about it, and she's like, "Why don't you climb it?" And I said, "You want me to climb the imaginary cliff?" Okay, that's weird, but so I visualized, and I'm going up the route, and all of a sudden I feel somebody grab me under my armpits and lift me up on top of this cliff, and it freaked me out. Like, there's only her and I, and her hands are on my head. And it was so weird. I told her about it. She's like, well, what's up there? And I remember I had my eyes closed, but I could see. It was hard to explain. But I said, there's no light, there's no dark. Oh, wait, there's somebody here. There's somebody here with us or with me. And I could reach out with my right hand, and I could feel the presence of this man who was so loving. I mean, just wasn't human. And so I told her about him, like, there's a man here, like I can touch him. He's right there. And she said, oh, it sounds like you found yourself a helper. I'm like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever been through.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, why don't you ask him for help? I was like, oh, okay. So I remember I actually like physically pulled him to me and I said, I need help. I don't understand this. I'm the healthiest person that I know. How can, like, why is this happening to me? And I could communicate telepathically to him. So it gets really weird. I could hear what he said. And he said, you need to look within.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I said, am I going to be successful with how I'm approaching this? Changing my diet, meditating, all, thoughts, all these important things that I'm doing. Is this going to work? And he said, yes, continue. And then I asked the most important question: how was my dad?
Wow.
And my dad had died 4.5 years earlier.
Okay.
He was the one that told me to go into, or to at least look into chiropractic, because he said, that's a doctor, you're going to be trained in everything. You're trained in endocrinology, dermatology, OBGYN, everything. You're not going to get pigeonholed into a specialty like cardiology or podiatry or something like that. I never heard of it. But I was just amazed when I learned more about the whole approach to understanding every part of the body and how it works together. So I was sold. So anyway, so I asked about my dad. And when I asked, the angel disappeared. And so I'm laying there and I'm kind of like, what was that? Like, we're having this really important conversation. Now he's gone. And a few minutes later, I could feel him, but he was back on the other side of the room. And I turned and I looked and he had my dad with him. And it was so clear. I mean, he was holding my dad's wrist and his elbow, like he was presenting him. Like, you asked about him, here he is.
Yeah.
And I burst into tears. And, he had died 4.5 years earlier. So he never got to see me go into my doctor program. He never got to meet his granddaughter. But I couldn't believe he was there. And I'm just like, I'm crying. I have a tumor. And he said, I need to look within. And I don't understand why this is happening. And I could barely see. And his headaches are killing me. And I don't know what to do, Dad. I don't know what to do. And he said, I'm proud of you, baby. And something happened when he said that. And, I'm the youngest of 6. And kind of, you kind of feel like you're kind of left out when you're one of 6 kids.
Yeah, I would imagine.
But he really, I mean, I was important to him, just as I was to any of the other 5 kids. And when he said that, all of a sudden this feeling of peace came through me. And I said, I feel so bad I didn't see you before you died. And all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, I manifested a tumor out of regret. When he was in his dying process, I lived in Minnesota, he lived in Florida, and I had a trip to Mexico planned. And I decided to go to Mexico instead of going to see him. I was going to see him afterwards, and he died while I was on my vacation.
Okay.
And honestly, Taylor, I had no idea that I even had regret. I think as a 26-year-old, I was more like, whew, glad I didn't have to see that and go through all that. And then as a 31-year-old, my body's like, nope, dummy, we're going to put a tumor right behind your eyes until you get the attention of, and see that there is something there that you need to address.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And as soon as I realized it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is regret. It's going to sound crazy, but a very huge hand came through the ceiling and this light was coming out of it and it went into the top of my head and down into my tumor. And this light was so brilliant. It was so pure and so clear. And like, I've tried to come up with human words to explain it. And it just, nothing touches the brilliance of it that we can put into words. But I felt this light go through into my tumor, and then it went through my whole body. So every cell I could feel was just being bathed with this light. And it lasted several minutes. And I was laying there with my eyes closed going, I think I'm being healed. This is weird. This is so cool. But then it was also being really exhilarated. I could feel my vibrational frequency getting huge. And I mean, it was a wild experience. And that lasted for several minutes. And then I felt it start at my feet and it went all the way up my body and then over the top of my head again. And I laid there for several minutes with my eyes closed because I was too afraid of being disappointed because I really had not much vision left.
Yeah.
And the craniosacral therapist was like, you're going to have to open your eyes, honey. And I'm like, I know. When I finally opened my eyes and my vision was perfect. I mean, it was in minutes and it was perfect. And I was doing peripheral vision tests, like, oh my gosh, I can see my fingers. Everything was so clear.
That's
and
incredible.
I went back for a follow-up MRI. I had not even scar tissue. I mean, it was big,
Oh my
big
gosh.
tumor, no
Yeah.
scar tissue, nothing. But what happened after that is like I could remember what that light looked like. And if I remembered it, the palms of my hands would get really hot and tingly. And I was like, hey, wait a minute. I think I can do something with this. And
Yeah.
so people were coming in with, I remember a woman with MS that was blind in her left eye. And I was like, worked for me. So put my hands over her eyes. And I started thinking about that light. And I'm like, let it flow. And it took, I think it was 3 times with her. She got her vision back. And I was like, okay, we're onto something here. We're onto something here. So then other people were coming in with other unusual things.
Yeah.
And I would think about that light. My hands would get all fired up, and I'd be like, okay, here. And then I met some Reiki healers, and
Okay.
they were telling me about Reiki. And I was like, I think I'm going to learn Reiki. So as you know, I mean, you know me, I'm trained in so many different things, Qigong, homeopathy, chiropractic,
Yes.
all kinds of different things. And I'm like, I'm going to learn Reiki so this has a name. So it took 2.5 years, and I got my Reiki master. And now at least when people would ask what I do, I'm like, I do Reiki healing. But my Reiki
That's the
healing
name for it. Yeah.
is like super size Reiki. I mean, because it's literally tapping into that power, that divine
Yeah.
infinite intelligence, and letting it go to where it needs to go in people's bodies. That's why I work with people either physically in my office or I do
Yeah.
all over the world. Because when there's that intention, because that comes again, that intention of sending that healing light to somebody, if I know their name and address, where they are in the world, it will go through the quantum field and it will go to them. It's freaking wild. It's a lot of work on my end because you have to get up into a really high vibrational frequency to do it.
Yeah.
But I've had some incredible experiences with people all over the world
That's
receiving this light, and
yeah.
it's hard to explain. Um, but I ended up in LA because one of the things that happened is after my tumor healing, I would hear messages like, you need to do this, and which is also what happens when I work with clients. I'll be like, check that. I'm like, okay, I'll go check that. But the first time I ever landed at LAX, I heard "Welcome Home, Dani," and I was like, I don't live here. Why did I hear that? And
Yeah.
every time I would get to LAX, I would hear it. I now live 3 miles from LAX because I was like, I
Yeah.
guess I'm supposed to be here. So it's really weird coming from this northern Minnesota, a girl that grew up in the woods, to
Yeah.
crazy land. But I love it. I love living here. There's an energy out here that's so incredible. And I remember when I lived out here for 10 days, and I woke up and I was laying in bed and I was like, why do I feel so good here?
Yeah.
So wild. And all of a sudden I heard very clear in where I hear my messages, what does Los Angeles mean? And I was like, I don't know. So I Googled it. City of Angels. Like, oh, that makes sense. Duh.
Yeah. There you
City of
go.
Angels. So
That's
that's
so cool.
that's how I ended up here.
That's
And
amazing. And it's
yeah,
amazing that like you get to use what happened to you and your healing story to then help heal other people
I know. I love that. I
and touch
love
their
being able
lives. Yeah.
to use all these different resources and help people heal on different levels rather than just taking care of a physical symptom. It's like, let's look at really why this is happening. Is it emotional? Maybe.
Yeah.
Me, I'm the poster child of emotional manifestation right here. But it's wild the things that I see in people that uh, like I had one man that found me on Google. I'll give you not just my own emotional poster child.
Yeah.
So he found me on Google. I'm like, oh my god, no, he's gonna think I'm like a chiropractor. And I'm not like that. I use my education as a basis for all the work that I do.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, so what brings you to me? And he's like, yeah, I'm just tired of driving to Beverly Hills 3 to 4 times a week to get my neck cracked. And I was like, okay, we're gonna have to explain what I do here. I said, okay, so I'll explain what I do. You can see if it works for you, if it doesn't, and we'll just see. And
Yeah.
he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I put my hands on his head and immediately felt it sounds really weird, but it felt like all this energy was right in his heart chakra. And without even thinking, I just said, oh my gosh, you're full of so much grief. And he starts bawling his eyes out.
Mm.
And and I said, it's okay. So then I use Reiki because Reiki is really good for emotional healing.
Yeah.
to help him process through why he was so sad about something. But then I started thinking about it. I love physics. Okay, so if one force is pulling one direction, right? So if it's pulling in here, all
Yeah.
that energy pulling his head down, where's the counter force back here? So like a game of tug of war. And I said, you don't need your neck cracked. You need to deal with your grief. That's what's happening here. And so I did Reiki, I did some Qigong meridian work, and he stood up and he's like, oh, I've never adjusted this man's neck. I've not had to.
Amazing.
He didn't need it. That's not what his body needed. He needed to come in for something completely different. And he found me through Google of all
Yeah.
places.
So amazing. So yeah, that's such a good point. So something that's very unique about you and your approach is you really find that most people don't need their, back adjusted or their neck adjusted. It's something else. And so you do a lot of fascia work, and as you mentioned, you have other modalities that you use. So yeah, let's talk about that, because like you also do craniopathy and that as well. So yeah,
Okay.
talk about your approach then to chiropractic and why
Well,
you find that most people don't need necessarily a traditional adjustment. I mean, you again
right.
touched on it, but
And some people do need adjustments, and
right.
they're very safe. And one of the things that I really appreciate about my Qigong education was learning how to harness Qi or energy from
Mhm.
around us to generate that as force rather than, getting in and like laying on people. Because a lot of people think the chiropractors need to be these bodybuilders. I'm 125 pounds, I'm a small person, but I
Yeah,
can generate a lot of force because I know how to pull in Qi and help the body naturally receive it without having to put a lot of energy into it.
yeah,
But the fat, well, we should actually, let me grab my skull.
yes, yeah. I was hoping you were going to bring out your skull because
So I
I
do
find this amazing. Yeah,
this. So here's a skull. So a lot of people don't realize that our skulls are made up of separate bones. So there's 12 separate bones. They're all different colors on this model. So you can see there's joints all over top, even inside the mouth, deep inside there. And the reason we have these joints is just like we have joints in our hands so we can write or do sports and things like that. There's joints in the skull to keep the brain healthy. So as you breathe in and breathe out, there's this very slight motion that does like this. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. These 12 bones have 162 contact points between them. It's really important that they move properly. And little things can change them. Even going to the dentist and having a dental cleaning because you're putting force on the jaw for a long time, that can affect in here. And people that clench their teeth, a lot of times it's actually coming from the pelvis, which I should probably explain that too. So we understand, like when I looked at you, remember when I first
yeah.
worked with
Because I
you?
was clenching my
Your
teeth.
mouth.
Yeah,
You're like, no, but my hip hurts. And I'm like, just let me do it.
yeah.
Just trust me on this. So when you get this movement, what it's doing is it's circulating the cerebrospinal fluid around the brain, giving it all the nutrients and oxygen and things that the brain cells need to work right. So when we do craniopathy, a lot of times, like I see a lot of people for anxiety. Okay, so anxiety happens right in this part of the head, right at the top. Okay, ADHD is back here. Depression is really close. Um, so we want to make sure we really address that area because again, it's complicated. And then here, you look at the pelvis.
Mhm.
So this bone is your sacrum.
Okay.
Look how similar your sacrum and that blue bone, your occiput, look.
Oh wow, yeah, the shape.
Okay.
Totally.
And then you see this brown, it's weird to do this, the brown one and the wing
Oh,
bone.
the hip
See how
bone.
similar they look to one another?
Yeah.
Okay. So those work together to pump that fluid around your brain. And so when I looked, like the first time I met you, the reason I knew to look at your head first was based on some that kind of simple muscle testing I did with you and
Yeah.
testing how your ribs moved and things like that. And I was like, well, okay, we have to start up here. Your symptoms in your hip, but the issue was actually in the roof of your mouth. You were more stuck on this side of your head. You were more stuck on this side of your hip. Okay. So it's important to look at all these because I could use like a traditional chiropractic adjustment and adjust your pelvis, but if we're not addressing this, it's not going to
Yeah.
hold. I want my people's work to hold. I want it to get completed through. So whatever tension pattern or whatever compensation pattern or something like that that's happened, we get rid of it.
Yeah.
Clear it up.
Because all these little things then affect the biomechanics of your whole body.
Absolutely. You know, here's an interesting one. So, because this seems really weird, there was a professional pitcher that came to me with really, really bad, like career ending elbow pain. And he had been to all these specialists. Everybody's looking at his elbow, right? So I look at his elbow and like, it's swollen. Yep, definitely swollen.
Yeah.
So I said, it only hurts when you pitch? And he said, yes, ma'am. I'm like, let's see what it looks like when you pitch. So I moved the furniture out of the way. His coach had brought him here too. His coach was sitting here and like, what are you doing? I'm like, just let me watch. So he threw his pitch and I'm watching him. And I said, it's his left arch. And the coach is like, what? And I said, it's his left foot. It was pronating really bad. And so when you pronate, it tends to make your hip drop in, and there's going to be a counter force that pulls the opposite direction, just like we're talking about physics again. So if this is pulling down like this, the force is going to come out here. Mm-hmm. So I adjusted the arch of his foot and had him throw a pitch, and he's like, doesn't hurt. His coach is like, what? What are you talking? It just doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. And it was like, okay, so here's what we need to do with him. Everybody's poking the dragon. Okay. We're not looking at the full biomechanics. So what we did with him was we got him good arch supports, a good rigid counter on the heels of his shoes so that he wouldn't pronate so much. Saved his career. Wow. So I mean, simple things like that. I think they're simple because I do it all day. But looking at things in the whole complex of the human being makes such a big difference, a dramatic difference in their care.
It does. And most people are trained to just like, well, this is what's hurting, so this is the problem. And it is. Our body does, everything works together. So
yeah. And the fascia system's incredible.
Yeah, so we can talk about fascia. Because I didn't really know any of that until I met you.
Which is so amazing because you're such an athlete, you'd think you would know about it. But
yeah.
So fascia is like, it's this structural, like a fluid-filled web that infiltrates through everything, goes through all our muscles and organs. Everything's connected by this web of fascia. So if you took away like our skin and our blood vessels and things like that, you would still look like Taylor. I mean, just all the fascia would still be there. So physically you would look like you just didn't have the skin or the bones and things like that. And so fascia is really intelligent, and it's fascinating to work with because you can feel it be hard as crystal, or all of a sudden it just completely relaxes. And I know we've worked on your inner thigh muscles before, and sometimes those mothers are tight. Yeah. Okay. And it hurts sometimes. It does. But when it gets tight, like especially in your inner thigh, you'll feel it in your same side on the low back.
Low back, yeah.
A lot of times that's what I know. I can tell where I'm going to work based on what's happening in somebody's back.
Yeah. And for the longest time, I thought maybe I had like a slip disc or something because my low back was like bothering me so much. And you're like, no.
No, that's not it. No, it was that fascia was pulling so tight that it makes it seem like a disc. Yeah. And so we would get in there. I mean, we've been through this a few times and just hold it until it releases. And then all of a sudden that whole side in here releases. It's really interesting work. A lot of times with shoulders, that's such a common thing, especially typing. People at computers all day and they're just they're so tight. Main shoulder issue actually comes from back here, back in that muscle, in that fascia that's deep in there. And because we're doing so much tension here, holding our arms up, again, here comes the game of tug of war. So if this is tight, this is going to be tight. We tend to do this, go to a massage therapist. Oh, it feels good. Good. You know? Spouse comes behind you and rubs your shoulder and you're like, oh, that feels good. Issues back here. So if we can take care of that muscle, that will make this relax, and it makes people's bodies just work so much better.
Yeah. So when your fascia is tight at one point, it then also affects your whole body mechanics of.
Absolutely, because it's all connected.
Yeah.
All connected. One thing that I brought a little thing to show you, because I don't know if I've ever told you this. So this little thing is called a quartz point. It's a crystal.
Yes.
And if you lay on your back and you put one of these above your head, okay, and you put one at your feet. Okay, so you're laying on your back, one's above your head, one's at your feet, both of them pointed to the right, that will decompress your fascia. So people that are always super, super tight, get a couple of these quartz points, get them on Amazon, they're easy enough to get there. They should be about maybe 4 or 5 inches long. Lay down, and all of a sudden they'll start feeling themselves just kind of like everything releases. I love teaching about self-care, things that people can do to help themselves, because it's so nice. It helps me too. because it helps them.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times, like the tips and stuff that you've given me is like, it's so simple, like that point on the bottom of my feet to like help release my clenching at nighttime.
Oh yeah, we should
Yeah.
talk about that.
Yeah.
I don't have a foot model, but uh, I can show you on my shoe
Okay, there you go.
right there. There's a spot in the bottom of your feet that if you rub it before you lay down, you have to do it before you lay down. It will make you stop clenching your teeth at night. So for women, they should start with the right one and rub it for like 5-10 seconds. Men should start on the left. It's just how chi flows in men and women.
Okay.
But you got to do it before you lay down, before you lay down.
Okay.
And it really works, doesn't it?
And it does, it really works. I've done it because then the nights I wouldn't do it, I would clench again.
Yep.
So
And
yeah.
then what happens to your hips?
And my hip, I wake up with my hip tight.
Together.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating how it all works together. And I never thought much, I mean, and it's crazy because I know the body works together, at least on our like, all our functions internally, but I wasn't thinking of our biomechanics and everything, meridians and fascia and everything working together too.
Yeah,
So,
we're
yeah.
complicated.
We are, yeah, beautifully so, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So the fascia also impacts our lymph system, which I talk about the lymphatic system a lot with clients.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you share how fascia and the lymph system are related?
Did I share that? I shared that video with you, didn't I?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Any of you that are watching, go on Sterling Structural Therapy's website. They have a really great demonstration of fascia. So
I'll
they have
link the video in our podcast description.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
So, okay, so if the fascia is tight, so you have to think about what the lymphatic system does. So it circulates around your body and it removes things like cellular debris, things you don't need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the only way that it can be pumped is with movement, right? So like our blood, we have a heart that pumps it. Lymphatic has to have movement. So like when I was a kid, I was always wondering like why. I was fascinated with spinal cord injuries when I was a kid. My brother's friend was paralyzed in a car accident. Wow. And so I was always interested, like, why are they having them lay on their back and people like moving their legs for them and moving their arms? They're not going to walk again. Like, why are they doing that? And then one day it hit me, it's like, duh, they're moving the fat or the lymphatic system. That makes so much sense because you have to have it moving in order for the body to stay healthy. So if you can imagine the fascia being tight, like in your case, either tight in the roof of your mouth or tight in your hip, that lymphatic system can't flow the way it's supposed to. It's like, I'll talk like a Minnesotan. It's like having a beaver dam that's across a river. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden the water can't get past the dam very well. Some does, some gets through, but it doesn't get through as efficiently unless you took all those logs out of the way and let it flow. Yeah. Makes sense?
Yeah. So people then experience lymph stagnation.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's so fascinating. And then, people, I know like with people, because people have lymph stagnation and it's so common and they'll go get a lymphatic massage and then that works for a second, but it doesn't then really quite always get to the root cause of why their lymphatic system keeps getting stagnant and getting backed up. Yeah. And
one of the things that I've read about that makes a huge difference for the lymphatic system is the iliacus muscle, which is the one that runs in here.
Okay, is that the one with like the hook we use?
Yeah, the hip hook, it's in there. That's a really, really common fascia pattern for that muscle to get tight and then the whole body kind of contorts around it.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's so crazy. What are some like unusual like signs or symptoms that people will come to you with that's a sign that their fascia is twisted?
Recurring hip and low back pain. Okay. That's a huge one. Tension in their shoulder, like really unexplained tension in their shoulder. Liver is really common because the liver is really big. It's right there. And they're like the whites in my eyes don't look white anymore, or the liver neurologically refers to the right shoulder. So there's like, I don't know what is going on with my shoulder. I saw this a lot during COVID where people were coming in and like, I think I did something to my rotator cuff. I don't know what I did. And I would check them and it would be liver, like so often. And at first I was like, okay, are people like boozing it up? Which I think they were, but people were wearing masks. and forgetting to drink water. So what does the liver do? It panics.
Yeah.
It's trying to detoxify your body. So it sends up this tension pattern up into your trap muscle. It makes you feel like you've got rotator cuff stuff.
Wow.
But if you've got dehydration and you're sitting at a computer, or like when people were sitting in crappy chairs working from home,
Yeah.
and their back is getting tight or their hips are getting tight, or they're sitting, I see people that they'd be sitting on one hip on their couch tight, kind of leaned over typing. And
Yeah.
I'm like, seriously? You're sitting like that for 8 hours a day?
Yeah.
You're gonna be messed up. Like, come on.
Totally. Yeah. That is not good alignment at all. Well, and then you had, and I don't think it was fascia related, but you recently had like a ringing in your ear and you were able to like get to like you figured out what was going on with,
Yeah, it was so weird. Yeah, I started having ringing in this ear, and my nephew's wife is an audiologist, and my sister's like, maybe you should see an ear doctor. And I'm like, I don't think it's my ear. I think it's from holding my grandson. He's almost 30 pounds.
Yeah.
And you can't help but not put him on your hip. Because remember that side bone and your
Oh,
iliac
yeah.
bone work together, right? So I'm like, I think it's something to do with my iliacus on the same side. And so I got a hip hook release tool, and I laid on it, and I mean, it looks like it's like a torture device, but it feels so good. And what I realized was by holding him, that was getting so tight that it referred a symptom up to my ear. And I think it was the second time I used it, all of a sudden the ear ringing went away. Wow. And oh my gosh, anybody that has ear ringing, I'm sorry, it sucks. It is so annoying. Oh gosh, it was like, make it stop. I'd be laying in bed. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
And you can't put time laying on it. And that's why I was like, it's got to be coming from here. It's not my ear.
Yeah. So
fascinating.
Yeah. I know. I thought that was really, really cool. And that's the thing, like those are little symptoms that people will be walking around with and like, I don't know what's going on. And then it's something as simple as you need to release like this muscle in a different part of your body.
Oh, the other thing for liver that's a really good one is on your right hand, right in here. If it's really tight, that's usually a sign of liver issues.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Liver stagnation or dehydration or something like that.
Yeah. Interesting. That's so cool. So how long have you been?
My dog wants to join us.
So cute. So
cute.
And so how long have you been practicing? Obviously a while now. Yeah.
Let's see, 29 years. I think I've been licensed 29 years. Long time.
Amazing. Yeah. And what are some of like the most interesting cases you've had? Obviously you talked about the man that found you on Google and it was like he was just experiencing grief, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, that was a wild one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I had a quadriplegic that came in. It was a really interesting story too. He has a huge family. His dad was one of 18 kids.
Wow.
And he had been drinking and driving, and he crashed his car into a tree, and he hit the steering wheel with his face, right? So when he hit the steering wheel with his face, he knocked out 10 teeth, and he didn't break his neck, so they couldn't figure out why he was a quad, so from the neck down. Mm-hmm. And so then the doctors thought maybe he had a blood clot in his spinal canal, so then they cut off these bones that stick off the back, all these little ones.
Okay.
Hoping they could get to the spinal cord. And once they opened it up, they couldn't find a blood clot. So then they fused this. Oh, so now I've got this 19-year-old kid, missing teeth, can't move. And they're like, can you help him? I'm like, let's see.
Yeah.
They do cranial work, he had a bad head injury. Like, I mean, this wasn't doing it. There was no fracture anywhere in there. And so I started doing cranial work, and I think it took a couple of weeks and he could start moving a little bit of his fingers. And then he could start moving his feet. But the work wasn't holding. And I was trying to figure out what is missing here? Like, why isn't this cranial work holding? Because something's happening because your brain runs everything. So something's happening in here. Yeah. It's not letting it hold. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, he's missing 10 teeth. So it's like having a wall that's built with just drywall, but no studs.
Okay.
So you have to have the studs to hold up
Okay,
the
yeah,
wall. Okay.
yeah.
And so God bless this dentist. They found a dentist that was willing to donate the 10 teeth implants. And it took a while, it's a big process to do that. But once he got those teeth, that's when things really started to move forward. So he is now a bodybuilder, got a couple of
Wow.
kids. Um, I've seen pictures of him on a motorcycle.
Amazing.
On a motorcycle.
Yeah, yeah, that's a little scary, but
That was a really powerful experience. And I was still, relatively new. I think I'd been in practice maybe 6 years at that point. I was like, well, nobody ever told me what to do with this case. And that's when I was like, okay, I just have to listen to what's my intuition.
yeah,
This was badly injured.
yeah,
This is my wheelhouse. Like, let me see what I can do here. Can't move any of this because it's all fused. Okay.
yeah.
So something had happened in here, and that's a really great case because it shows the importance of teeth. Oh, that brings me to another case. I don't think I've ever talked to you about this. I've had a client coming in that's had this kind of recurrent right SI, sacroiliac joint pain,
Okay, yeah.
or it goes out often. And he's in excellent shape. He's a martial artist. I mean, he's in really, really, really good shape. And we're like, well, why is this not holding? Like the work should be holding.
Yeah.
And we got to be talking about a tooth that he had pulled. And I said, did everything start around that time? He's like, yeah, that's so weird. So I have this chart of how each tooth is related to different parts of the body.
Oh yeah, that like
So
the Chinese, it's like in Chinese medicine how
yeah, it'll
they
affect
relate to,
your psoas muscle or your
yes.
thoracic 6 and 8 or whatever.
Yeah.
So when we started looking at that tooth, like we need to get that space filled up because he doesn't have the stud in his wall, which was the bottom one,
Mhm,
in the
mhm.
wall holding his skull system up. So he went to a homeopathic dentist out in Jersey, I think it is. And it took a process. I mean, he had to go out and get the bottom thing put in, and then he got the implant put in. But he's been doing great. I mean,
Wow.
amazing. And he was telling his mom about it. And she had a tooth pulled many years ago, but she's had chronic, like mid back and hip flexor pain.
Okay.
And we took out the chart. So he talked her into coming over here, and we took out the chart, and I was showing her on the chart. It's like psoas, lumbar 5,
Yeah.
all these things on her. She's like, okay, I'll go get an implant. So you don't think about it because
No.
hers was this furthest back one,
Okay.
but you wouldn't see if she's smiling. So I think a lot of times we think, like, you get an implant if it's one that you see in your smile, but hers was back here, and they're like, you're going to be able to chew fine. Don't worry about it. But then it set off this whole thing in her back. It's just wrong. So
Yeah.
I'm so excited because it made sense to her after she saw the chart. It's literally in writing. These are the
That's
things it's going to be affecting. Like,
awesome.
it's so
Yeah.
cool.
And our teeth, it is amazing how much our teeth can impact different things. And we tend to not really think much about it if we have a root canal or whatever the case may be. And that
Right.
has such a domino effect on other things and clearly on like our mechanics as well of how everything works, not just our internal organs. So
Right.
yeah, because I know like at least the chart I'm thinking of, um, which I used to have sitting over here, is like in Chinese medicine, like each tooth also refers to like an organ in the body.
Yes. Yep.
So yeah,
We're complicated.
I
Man, we got to
know.
take care of these. Got to take care of these things. I always say, if you wear out, if you wear out your body, where are you going to live?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we underestimate the power of our skulls. Like, I mean, I never thought that that our skull was all different, like multiple bones. It was just like, oh, it's my head, it's my one
Yeah.
skull, and then like your jaw piece, like that's
Yeah.
everything. But
You
it's much
you
more
know, one
intricate.
one thing I saw out here when I moved out here, and I didn't see it as much in Minnesota, but there's a lot of C-sections out here.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I noticed this pattern. So your frontal bone right here, in a C-section, this bone doesn't tend to move right because in a vaginal delivery, there's a joint here too. These
Mhm.
bones get kind of pushed together. to make the baby head small for it to come out, but C-sections don't get that compressive force. And so I've never seen a paper written on this, but it's something that I've seen over and over and over again. So
Yeah.
when this doesn't move right when you breathe in and breathe out, there's a lot of things that happen in here. Like we talked about, anxiety happens in here, depression happens in here, addiction, OCD, eating disorders. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this area that
Wow.
I think could be addressed if people would get their babies checked, especially after C-section right
Yeah.
away. And just because like working with babies, you touch like as much as you would touch your eyeball. I mean,
Yeah. Very
working with infants is so cool because they will, like, I had a baby in here a few weeks ago. He only wanted to turn his head this way. And so if he's laying there with his head this way, he's one of those babies that eventually somebody would probably put a helmet on him because he'd have a flat spot on his head. I see those helmets, I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no.
So you're not a fan of the helmets then to
Oh
reshape?
gosh, no, 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 because it's not taking care of what's going on internally. There's like we talked about fascia. I mean, there's fascia in the brain. There's these tentorium, that these big connective tissues that go through here and back here that hold the skull in place. If these aren't working right, it can change the shape of the eye socket. Okay, it could change the shape of the mouth. You know, they might have poor vision in one side of their eye because the socket's smaller. They might have crossed eyes, or it's all kinds of crazy things. But anyway, with baby, like this baby that was just in, like he wanted to turn his head to the right. He's 4 weeks old, and he was stuck right here. So I hold it. Babies are so smart. That's how, like when they're being born, they know how to kind of wiggle themselves out. They can figure it out.
Wow.
So I held my finger there, and he just kept pushing his neck against it, pushing his neck, and all this, and you could see his dad was sitting on the couch watching him, and his whole body's contorting. And I'm like, I said, he's unwinding his fascia, and pushing this, his legs are moving, his hips are moving, and all of a sudden he turns his head to his dad, and his dad's like, "Oh my gosh!" He's turning his head to the left. And I thought, if people understand how babies are so easy to work with. I mean, we're not cracking necks or anything like that on a baby. It's a very gentle hold, and they will kind of position into it. So things like colic and all these things that are absolutely unnecessary, and helmets.
Yeah.
Get me started.
Well, that's amazing. And most parents probably don't know that it's a fascia issue. Like you mentioned colic, people probably don't even think that fascia or anything is related to that.
And if you have a newborn and they're turning their head one way, just turn it the other way. Because their skulls are so malleable that by putting the force on this side, it literally helps the other side start to shape properly, to take the force off of it. I always think of it as like if you squeeze a balloon, the rest of the balloon goes out a different part. So if you're holding here, it's going to put force into the flat spot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. Yeah. And I think, yeah, the work that you've done on infants that you've shared with me today and in the past is fascinating. And I mean, I would have never thought to bring a baby to a chiropractor and have it worked on. So,
that's one of the hardest things is when somebody brings a newborn in because their newborn is perfect, it's like, and I have to be the one that's like, actually, okay, so if you look at her eyes, this one's a little bit lower. They're like, oh, it is. And I'm like, okay, so your baby's perfect. It just needs a little work in the roof of its mouth.
Yeah.
I remember one time a baby came in and she was, very misshapen. One eye lower, her mouth was off to one side. She was 4 months old and she had never slept more than 15 minutes at a time.
Oh my gosh.
Her brother, I think he was 3, and the mom, they came in together and they both dark circles under their eyes. And she's like, here, help my baby.
Yeah.
And, so I was working on the roof of her mouth, and she had a really fast birth. And she's wiggling and kind of moving around. And I said, okay, she's done. And my mom worked with me at that time. So I put the baby on my mom's lap while I worked on the mom. And I'm looking over at the baby and I'm seeing her head as she's breathing, changing shape. And like, I cannot wait for this mom to get off this table and look at her baby.
Yeah.
So and she got up when she was done and she looked and she's like, oh my gosh, she looks so different. She's so symmetrical. And I said, yeah, she's gonna be feeling a lot better. She called me later that day and she's like, she's been sleeping for 5 hours.
Oh my goodness.
Is that normal? I'm like, yes. She goes, should I do anything? I'm like, go nap.
Yeah,
Like,
go get your sleep.
4 months of sleeping not more than 15 minutes at a time. She's exhausted. Go to
Yeah.
sleep. She's now, I just saw the other day on my computer, she's 26, I think, or 25. And I'm like,
Oh my gosh.
what? How'd she get to be that old? I don't feel like
Yeah.
I'm aging, and all my babies that I've taken care of are old. It's crazy.
Yeah. But I'm sure that's so cool to see these babies that you've taken care of, like be adults now and like, yeah,
Yeah,
perfectly happy, healthy people.
I know. They're so
So
cute.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it was so fun to talk about fascia and your approach to chiropractic. So for anyone who's listening who lives in LA, if they want to come and, schedule an appointment with you, how do they find you?
My website is drdani.life. So DOCTORDANI life.
Awesome. Perfect. And then for people who don't live in LA, could they schedule with you on there if they wanted to do like a remote session, or is there like a
Yep.
type of practitioner they should keep their eyes open for in their area who,
Uh, I mean, they can book through my website, or they could. I love sacro-occipital technique. SOT
okay.
is which makes sense. It's, remember here, there's sacrum,
Okay. Yes.
occiput. So that technique is really, really, really great. So there's two different places that I belong to: Sorsi, SORSI.com,
Okay.
and SotoUSA.com. And then they can go on there and they can click locate a doctor or find a doctor.
Okay.
And people that know this technique will be listed on there. There's a lot of us.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's good to know because I would have never thought to look for something like, for that type of approach. And now,
You
yeah,
know,
I could
you know
never.
what's so funny? A lot of people have no idea I'm a chiropractor,
Yeah, I could
which is
totally see
awesome.
that. Yeah. I know.
I
Well,
hear that all the time.
when
Like,
my
I
friend
never
first
had
referred
any
me
idea. Yeah,
to you, when my friend first referred me to you, she's like, "Oh, go see my chiropractor." And she's like, "It's hard to explain, but like she's a chiropractor, but she's like not a chiropractor." And I'm like, "Okay, what does this mean?" So
very
I can
true.
see that. Yeah.
I remember I had a couple that owned an advertising agency that came in one time, and I have a really hard time explaining what I do because it is so comprehensive and it's coming from so many different angles.
I could see
And I
that.
got done with both of them, and I said, okay, so now you guys have experienced like what this type of work is. How would you, as advertising people, describe it? And they both looked at each other and they looked at me and they said, magic. Okay, well, it's actually scientific, but
Right. Yeah.
magic works. That's the fastest elevator pitch I've ever heard.
Yeah. That's so funny. So you even left them stumped a little bit though.
I guess. Anyway, thanks for having me, Taylor. It was awesome
Of
to talk.
course. Well, I do appreciate you taking the time, but I've been wanting to have you on and talk about all of this because I find your story and like I said, and I find what you do so incredibly fascinating. So
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Take care.